Hey YouTube, Kira Twig here, bringing you all an update to my Ice Barrier Yu-Gi-Oh deck profile for post-Lightning Overdrive. Even though we just got one card from the new Lightning Overdrive set for the Ice Barrier deck, I still feel that entails an update to the deck. It's a really fun deck. For those of you that don't know, the Ice Barrier deck is just meant to play off of the different main deck monsters that can synchro summon out all the different Ice Barrier monsters we have in the extra deck, with our main boss monster being Trishula and its new evolution form as well that we got from the latest structure deck, along with all the other dragons of the Ice Barriers and Deloran, and just the overall good water support we can run in our extra deck that works well with all the other different Ice Barrier monsters we have in the deck. So let's go ahead and get started with the deck profile. So for our first of the new monsters, actually I say first, but it's the only new one aside from the structure deck new ones we received a while back. I'm running 3 of the new Judge of the Ice Barrier. It's a pretty awesome card. While you control another Ice Barrier monster, each time your opponent activates a card or effect by paying life points, they lose 500 life points. And then you go and use each of the following effects of Judge of the Ice Barrier once per turn. You can target up to 2 Ice Barrier monsters in your graveyard and 2 cards in your opponent's graveyard, shuffle them into the deck. If you control an Ice Barrier monster, you can banish this card from your graveyard to target 1 attack position monster on the field and change it to defense. So the big play with the attack position is the defense capabilities of a good amount of your different Ice Barrier monsters. So having them in defense themselves instead of just changing your own, like our Defender of the Ice Barrier, can be big for the defense play that the main deck monsters for the Ice Barriers can do. So Judge of the Ice Barrier is great for that, but also just being able to recycle a good number of our different Ice Barrier monsters for future plays is very useful, and being able to take away from our opponent's graveyard with that setup by shuffling their own cards is another big help. So this card basically just sets up and is used for the main plays that the Ice Barrier deck is meant to do in total. For the newer support from the structure deck, still running 3 of the Revealer of the Ice Barrier. While you control another Ice Barrier monster, your opponent cannot tribute summon. You can only use each of the following effects of Revealer of the Ice Barrier once per turn. You can discard 1 card to special summon 1 Ice Barrier tuner from your deck. Also, you cannot special summon for the rest of this turn, except for water monsters. And if you would discard or send a card from your hand to the graveyard to activate an Ice Barrier monster effect, you can banish this card from your graveyard instead of one of those cards. So with the big play with this card, obviously with Gungnir or even our Bryonic, we have the discard cost, being able to use Revealer for that. But the other important thing with Revealer is that she can special summon out a bunch of different tuners for us to synchro summon into our Ice Barrier monsters. So very useful to rely on these tuners for all of those plays that we can set up later with the deck. And that's why you definitely want to run 3 of her. Just having access to all those cards makes her very vital for those plays. And I also run 3 of the Speaker for the Ice Barrier. While you control another Ice Barrier monster, defense position monsters your opponent control cannot change their battle position. And you can only use each of the following effects of Speaker of the Ice Barrier once per turn. If you control an Ice Barrier monster, you can special summon this card from your hand. If you control an Ice Barrier monster, you can banish this card from your graveyard to special summon 1 Ice Barrier token onto the field as well. So another play on the defense aspect is with Judge of the Ice Barrier. If you have Speaker of the Ice Barrier on the field and also Judge of the Ice Barrier, not only when you change your opponent's monster to defense does it stop their play, but also for the fact that they won't be able to change the position of those monsters. So unless they use it for, let's say, another extra deck play, it's basically stuck in defense position. Frozen is a better term for it, because that's, I would say, what the point of the Ice Barrier cards is, basically to freeze your opponent's monsters in their tracks. For one more set of the play set of cards we run for the main deck, I also run 3 General Wayne of the Ice Barrier. Spell and trap cards from the field to your opponent's graveyard are banished instead, and you can use each of the following effects of General Wayne of the Ice Barrier once per turn. If your opponent controls a monster and you control an Ice Barrier monster, you can special summon this card from your hand. If this card is normal or special summon, you can add 1 Ice Barrier spell trap from your deck to your hand. We run a good majority of different Ice Barrier spell or traps, including Medallion, which is just a searcher for the deck, but also cards like Wind over the Ice Barrier and Freezing Chain of the Ice Barrier all can provide very useful plays for the deck in total. So having that search power with General Wayne and the fact that it can easily special summon onto the field and just give us the 1 non-tuner we may need for one of our tuner plays as well can basically go very far for that setup. For some of the lower numbers in the deck, including the tuners that we run, I run 2 Hexa Spirit of the Ice Barrier, with this level 1 tuner being one of our main go-to uses in the deck. While you control another Ice Barrier monster, monsters your opponent control lose 500 attack and defense during your main phase. You can send one level 3 or lower Ice Barrier monster from your deck to the graveyard, and if you do, this card's level becomes the same as that monster's until the end of this turn. You want to use this effect of Hexa Spirit of the Ice Barrier once per turn. So we're only running 2 types of tuners in the deck, so being able to adjust the levels with Hexa Spirit of the Ice Barrier is very, very useful for the different level of monsters that we run, including the fact that Trishula is a level 9, Gungnir is a level 7, Bryonic level 6, and Deloran, and so on. So being able to adjust those levels if we don't have the proper monster, mix up on the field, and just being able to send that monster to the graveyard to adjust the level depending on what we have, or even just keep it the level that it is, for the fact that Trishula is a level 9, means it's very, very useful to rely on for that setup. And then the fact that it lowers our opponent's monster's attack is just an added bonus. And one more of the tuners and more on the defense plays for the deck. I also run 2 Defender of the Ice Barrier. While you control another Ice Barrier monster, monsters your opponent control cannot declare an attack if their attack is greater than or equal to this card's defense. So basically, having that setup play on the field, you have a monster and a setup so your opponent cannot attack with monsters over 1600 attack. This is kind of the lock I was speaking of before, just being able to restrict your opponent's monsters from changing their battle position, changing them yourself, and then just making sure that they can't attack. You have a good lockdown setup, and you don't even have to rely on any of the extra deck monsters, which are more given in the deck for the offensive capabilities that the deck plays all together. But you can rely on Defender of the Ice Barrier just for another easy special summon, or even a level adjustment if you were to use it with Hexa Spirit, being one of the level 3 monsters we run in the deck. For more special summoning options, I also run 2 Prior of the Ice Barrier. If you control a face-up Ice Barrier monster, you can special summon this card from your hand. You cannot special summon any level 5 or higher monsters the turn you use this effect, and you contribute this card to target one Ice Barrier monster in your graveyard except Prior of the Ice Barrier and special summon that target. So not only it does restrict you for your special summon of your Synchro Monsters, that's why I'm only running 2 of it in the deck, because it's more here just to help with more of the lockdown setup. Whether you have, let's say your Speaker or your Defender of the Ice Barrier, being able to special summon out Prior and then tribute it to summon another one onto the field can set up the proper locks you need, and not just having this additional monster. And also for the fact that if you wanted to go for a Link summon, this is just an additional card to use for it, and also for the fact that Prior the Ice Barrier is an Aqua monster, makes a good target for Totally Awesome if you weren't going to go the Bahamut Shark route. For finishing up some of the 2 numbers for the Ice Barriers, I also run 2 Warlock of the Ice Barrier. While you control another Ice Barrier monster, both player must set spells before activating them and cannot activate them until their next turn. So this is basically an anti-spell fragrance for the Ice Barrier deck. So it locks out your opponent, but you can also control when this effect resolves, because unlike anti-spell fragrance, this is a monster which can be gotten rid of on the field much, much easier than a face-up continuous trap. So with it, you can obviously have it on your opponent's turn. So they have to wait a turn for their spells, and then with your turn, if you have a spell you need to activate, just use Warlock of the Ice Barrier for an extra deck play that I spoke of, and then you're free to use your spells how you want. For some of the other lower numbers, I also run 1 Zhin of the Ice Barrier. You contribute this card to special summon 1 level 5 or higher Ice Barrier monster from your hand. If this card is in your graveyard, except the turn it was sent there, you can target 1 level 3 or higher water monster you control, reduce its level by exactly 2, and if you do special summon this card but banish it when it leaves the field, you can only use this effect of Zhin of the Ice Barrier once per turn. So this is another card that you can send with Hexa Spirit of the Ice Barrier to the graveyard, and then just the level adjustment for the fact that Trishula needs 2 or more non-tuner monsters to summon it out, means that you can at least reduce the level of another one you have on the field, summoning this card, giving you the requirements you need on the field, and then with your tuner included, have that monster met. You could have your tuner and one other non-tuner on the field and be equaled out to level 9, but you might need to reduce the level of that monster by summoning out Zhin onto the field to then be able to summon Trishula. For some of the other boss monsters for the main deck, I run 1 General Raiho of the Ice Barrier, 1 General Gantala, and 1 General Grunnard of the Ice Barrier. I only run 1 of each of these. They're searchable with the spells we run in the deck, also easily summoned out when you use Zhin, but also they each provide something different for the deck, whether it's the control aspect or your General Raiho, the search power off of your General Grunnard, and the special summon of Gantala. They all come in handy, but at specific times, so that's why I only run 1 of each, because then you'll know when you want to use each one of these cards for those plays. And then for the last of the monsters in the main deck, I just run 3 Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. It's player preference with this. If you want, it's also a tuner, so in emergency situations, if you do need to synchro summon, you can use Ash Blossom, but it's more in here just for the fact that it is a very good hand trap and can stop a good amount of your opponent's search or graveyard setup. And that is it for the monsters. We'll now move on to the spells. One of the best spells in the deck is our Searcher we've had since the beginning, and that is Medallion of the Ice Barrier. Not only is this card not a once per turn, so if you have multiples of this card, you can activate each and every one of them. So very, very useful for that search, because then if you have 2 in your hand, you can just search out your Zhin of the Ice Barrier, which has the tribute of a level 5 or higher, and then being able to search out the last of the search power you may need for that summon using this card alone on the field. I also run 3 of the newer card from the structure deck, which is Wins Over the Ice Barrier. You tribute any number Ice Barrier monster, special summon from your deck as many level 4 or lower Ice Barrier monsters with different names from each other, and during your main phase, except the turn this card was sent to the graveyard, you can banish this card from your graveyard to target one of your Ice Barrier monsters that is banished or in the graveyard and add it to your hand. You can only use each effect of Wins Over Ice Barrier once per turn. So you have options to go into different Ice Barrier monsters using this, and also to recycle some of your other cards that may get banished, whether it be for their own monster effects, like your Revealer of the Ice Barrier, or even Zhin, you have the recycle power to rely on with this card, and also just for more of that setup that Judge of the Ice Barrier might provide on the field with all the other different ones that you can special summon. And then lastly, for the Ice Barrier spells, I also run 3 Freezing Chains over the Ice Barrier. With this one, when this card is activated, you can target one level 4 or lower Ice Barrier monster in your graveyard, special summon it, and while you control 3 or more Ice Barrier monsters you control are unaffected by the activated effects of your opponent's monsters that were special summoned from the extra deck, and you can only activate 1 Freezing Chains over the Ice Barrier once per turn. So a monster reborn for your Ice Barrier monsters. Well, the fact that we run 3 of each card is that they're just very, very vital for your plays, whether it be for special summoning, adding, you name it, they all provide that protection. And when Freezing Chains over the Ice Barrier and having 3 different Ice Barriers on the field is resolved, you just have that protection because your opponent will rely a good amount on a different amount of, extra deck plays to at least get rid of those monsters. And when you have this card protecting them, and also your different locks from them attacking, or even just changing their battle position, or changing their battle positions for them, makes it all the difference when your monsters will at least be protected by those other monster effects. And then lastly, for the spells, I run 1 Foolish Burial and 1 Monster Reborn. With the graveyard plays for the Foolish Burial, you can set up a lot in your graveyard depending on what you need to use, whether it just be setting up your Revealer or your Zhin, or just an Ice Barrier to special summon off of Freezing Chains over the Ice Barrier. Foolish Burial is very good for that. And any target with Monster Reborn, since there's really no special summoning limits for all of our main deck monsters to summon out onto the field. And then for the traps, the only trap I'm running in the deck is Terror of Trishula. You apply these effects separately depending on the number of Ice Barrier Synchro Monsters you control with different names. If it's 1, you banish 1 card your opponent controls, 2, banish 1 card in your opponent's graveyard, or 3, banish 1 random card from your opponent's hand. So it's basically Trishula in a trap card form. And when you have all these different Synchro Monsters on the field, we're not limited with Master Rule 4 anymore, so you can use the main monster zone as much as you want for Synchro Summons. So being able to have that is a big plus as well with your Terror of Trishula trap, and just the multiple uses that this card has for the graveyard banish also. Basically provides that you can banish this card and negate the effects of when your opponent activates a card that targets an Ice Barrier Synchro monster. So extra protection from the graveyard also. Excuse me. And for the Synchro Monsters now, for our main boss monster, we're running 1 Trishula, 0 Dragon of the Ice Barrier. This is our go-to boss monster, being a level 11, needing 1 tuner and 2 or more non-tuner monsters. When this card is Synchro Summoned, you can banish up to 3 cards your opponent controls. If the Synchro Summon card in its owner's control is destroyed by an opponent's card, you can special summon 1 Trishula, Dragon of the Ice Barrier from your extra deck or graveyard, and its attack becomes 3,300. Then half the attack of any face-up monster your opponent controls, and then also negate their effects. You can only use each effect of Trishula, Dragon of the Ice Barrier, 0 Dragon of the Ice Barrier once per turn. So this is a true powerhouse to go into, and just for the fact that you can then summon out Trishula onto the field as well is an added bonus for that setup. And just for the fact that maybe you'll want to go for Trishula first because you can summon it from the graveyard also, so benefiting from Trishula's own banish effect, which we'll get to now. Running the 1 of this card also, when this card is Synchro Summoned, you can banish up to 1 card each from your opponent's hand, field, or graveyard. This card hand is chosen at random. So once you you take resources from Trishula, you can then summon out your Trishula 0 Dragon of the Ice Barrier, and then when that card leaves the field, summon back Trishula, just to always have a synchro option on the field, which works well with Terror of Trishula, being able to have a better benefit the more Ice Barrier Synchro Monsters you have also. I also run one Bryonic Defender Dragon of the Ice Barrier, one Deloran Tiger King of the Ice Barrier, and one Gungnir Dragon of the Ice Barrier. Destruction with Gungnir, bounce power with Bryonic, and with Deloran having more of a power boost for being able to target any other face-up cards you control. Returning them to the hand means you can also recycle them if you were to use continuous spells like Freezing Chain over the Ice Barrier again. So a big plus there for sure, and just different options for the levels as well on which one you may want to go into. For some of the other Synchro Monsters, I run one Coral Dragon, one Glacial Beast Iceberg Narwhal, and one Adamancipator Risen Dragite. Having the different levels, the level 8 especially with Dragite, and no real restrictions for the summons, just gives us more water Synchro Monsters to summon on the field, and true powerhouses for the level 6, 7, and 8 Synchro targets. For some more generic ones, I run one F.A. Dawn Dragster and one Borreload Savage Dragon. Synchro plays that are useful when you can go into them. Just, I prefer to go into the Ice Barrier plays when I can, but it's nice to have these two options available. For the Link Monsters, I run one Miss Starboy, one Marine Cess Coral Anemone, and one Area, the Water Charmer Gentle. This card is just good for setting up and taking our opponent's water resources, Coral Anemone for special summoning, and Miss Starboy for powering up our own water monsters we have on the field. For the Xyz monsters, I run the one Totally Awesome. This will only get full power to the deck if you have the Bahamut Shark. I have Abyss Dweller. I don't have a copy of Bahamut Shark. Sadly, I don't know where my copy went, but if you have Bahamut Shark, you can put it in instead of Abyss Dweller, because then you can just use any of the level 4s in the deck to detach and summon out your Totally Awesome. But Totally Awesome can be summoned normally in the deck as well, with the use of Prior, the Ice Barrier, being a Aqua level 2. So if you have two of those copies on the field, you can at least overlay those two together to go into your Totally Awesome. And as for some of the go-to plays in the deck, once again relying on your Revealer of the Ice Barrier for a big part of the summon. While you control another Ice Barrier monster, it reduces the tribute. Like I said, but you can discard a card to special summon one Ice Barrier tuner from your deck as well. So depending on what you discard, you could potentially set up more plays in the graveyard for the special summon, giving you another Ice Barrier to summon out from your deck as well. So with that, you can even just summon out your Judge of the Ice Barrier, needing the 2 for the overlay for the discard of an Ice Barrier monster tuner as well. So what you'll do is you'll discard it, summoning out your tuner, and that is the synchro right then and there for the play to rely on. Or you can even go, depending on the discard, you can go for your next play, which will be your Hexa Spirit of the Ice Barrier, and then you can use Hexa Spirit to reduce the level of any monster by basically this level become the same as the monster of the level 3 or lower Ice Barrier that you send to the graveyard, making it a level 7 option again using these two cards. Or if you at least have this card being a level 7 on the field, you can then summon Prior from the Ice Barrier from your hand, since you control an Ice Barrier monster, with the special summon of this card as well. It reduces your level 5 play, but you can still go for some other additional extra deck plays as well using these cards. But that is it for the deck profile. I hope you all enjoyed the video. I've always been a fan of the Ice Barriers, and with just that new support, it always inspires me to make an update to the deck. Like I said, even if we just get one card, I sometimes feel that's enough to update a deck profile. And until next time, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and Kira Twig out.